The beach house had been in our family for 41 years. My father bought it the summer I was 3 years old. A weathered Cape Cod on the Carolina coast with a wraparound porch and windows that rattled when the wind came in off the water. He paid cash for it, which in those days meant he had saved for nearly a decade to do it. It wasn't grand. The kitchen was too small, and the plumbing made sounds that had no obvious explanation, and the driveway flooded when it rained hard. But it was ours, and more than any other place in the world, it was the place where I understood what my family was supposed to be. Every summer of my childhood, we were there for 6 weeks. My parents, my sister Claire, and me, Joanna, in that small house with the sand that got into everything and the screen door that never quite closed properly. My grandfather, Harold, came for the last 2 weeks of every August without exception. He would arrive with a single leather bag and a bottle of good bourbon and settle into the porch chair as like a man who had earned his rest. And in the evenings he would tell stories about his own father and the business he had built. And I would sit on the steps below him and listen until my mother made me go to bed. Grandpa Harold and I had an understanding that I cannot fully explain even now. He was a formal man, precise in his language, deliberate in his opinions, not given to the easy warmth that some grandparents perform. But he saw me. That is the only way I know to say it. In a family where Claire was the beauty and the social success and the one who filled every room she walked into, Harold saw me, the quieter one, the one with the notebook, the one who asked him questions about the business when everyone else had drifted off to the beach. He answered every question, every single one. And when I was old enough to understand the answers, the conversations got longer. He died at 83, 3 years after my father, and then Claire took the beach house. And then, 4 months later, everything changed. My father's name was Robert Weston. He was a civil engineer by training and a careful man by disposition. The kind of person who read contracts before signing them and kept paper records of everything and believed, genuinely, that the details were where character revealed itself. He built a solid middle-class life, raised 2 daughters in a good neighborhood, saved consistently, and maintained the beach house as the family's anchor point for 4 decades. He was not wealthy in the way that changes your circumstances. He was wealthy in the way that means you never have to panic about the basics, and you can leave your children something meaningful. He also adored Claire. I want to be clear about what I mean when I say that, because I think clarity matters here. My father loved me. I believe that completely and without qualification. But Claire was the one who made him laugh, who charmed his friends, who gave him grandchildren early, and brought them to Sunday dinners, and created the kind of family tableau that my mother, at his core, had always wanted to inhabit. I was the one who moved across the country for a career, who married late, who called every week but wasn't there in person as much as I should have been. These are facts, not excuses. They matter because they shaped what happened. When Dad died, his will was straightforward. The house, our family home, not the beach house, the house we grew up in, went to my mother. The financial accounts were split evenly between Claire and me. The beach house, the 41-year-old Cape Cod with the rattling windows and the flooded driveway, went to Claire. I found out in the attorney's office, in a room that smelled like carpet cleaner and recirculated air, sitting next to my sister, while a man read words my father had written, and I tried to keep my face arranged into something neutral. I managed it. I am my father's daughter in that way. The details are where the character reveals itself. My character, in that moment, revealed itself as the kind that holds very still when something hits it. Claire cried. Not from guilt, I don't think. She was genuinely moved by the loss of my father, which is true of both of us and which I want to acknowledge. But she also reached over and put her hand on mine, and I felt, in that touch, something I couldn't name at the time. I understand it better now. It was the touch of someone who already knew what was in the will, who had known for a while. The months after Dad's death were managed by Claire with impressive efficiency. She had the beach house assessed within 3 weeks. She had contractors out the following month to address several years of deferred maintenance, the plumbing sounds, a section of the porch railing, the kitchen, which she renovated in a style that made it unrecognizable to anyone who had ever cooked a meal there with my father. By the following summer, she was renting it out for 12 weeks a year at rates that made my eyebrows move involuntarily when I saw the listing. I visited once during that period. Claire was gracious. The house was beautiful in the way that houses become when someone removes the accumulation of a family's actual life and replaces it with the curated version of what a beach house should look like. The bourbon cabinet where Grandpa Harold kept his bottle was now a display shelf for decorative coral. The porch chair he had claimed every August was gone, replaced by a set of matching outdoor furniture and powder-coated aluminum. I sat on that porch for an hour, and then I drove back to my rental, and I called my grandfather's old attorney, a woman named Sylvia Crane, whom I had met once at a family gathering years before, and whose card I had kept for reasons I could not have articulated at the time. And I left a message asking if she had a few minutes to speak. She called back the next morning. What she said on that call was short and careful and precise. She said she had been waiting to hear from me. She said my grandfather had anticipated that I might reach out after certain events unfolded. And she said she thought it would be better to meet in person, if I could manage it. I drove 4 hours to her office the following Thursday. Sylvia Crane's office was in a small city 2 hours inland. Not the kind of place you'd expect to hold the answer to anything, but the kind of place where things could be kept quietly for a very long time. Sylvia herself was a woman in her early 70s, with a silver braid and reading glasses on a chain, and the careful stillness of someone who has handled sensitive things for decades without dropping any of them. She had a folder on her desk. It was thicker than I expected. She offered me coffee. I took it. She settled into her chair and looked at me for a moment, assessing something, I thought, though I couldn't tell what. And then she said, "Your grandfather was a very particular man." "Yes," I said, "he was." She opened the folder. My grandfather, Harold Weston, had created a testamentary trust, a trust that comes into effect at the time of death rather than before it, in the final 2 years of his life. He had done this without telling anyone in the family, including my father, who predeceased him. The trust had 2 main components. The first was a portfolio of investments, stocks, bonds, and 3 real estate holdings, including a commercial property that had appreciated substantially over the years, with a total estimated value at the time of Harold's death of just over $4 million. The beneficiary of this portfolio was me. The second component was the one that made me set my coffee cup down very carefully on the edge of Sylvia's desk. My grandfather had also held, since the original purchase, a 50% ownership stake in the Carolina beach house. I did not know this. My father had not told me. Claire did not know it either, which I confirmed later and which I believe completely. Claire would not have renovated that kitchen if she'd known what she was walking into. When my father bought the beach house in the summer, I was 3 years old. He had done so with Harold's money as much as his own. Harold had insisted on it, not as a loan, but as a joint purchase, because he wanted a legal stake in a place where he intended to spend meaningful time, and because he was the kind of man who formalized arrangements that other families left casual. The 50% stake had never been sold. It had never been transferred. It had sat in Harold's name, correctly documented, for 41 years. And upon Harold's death, it transferred directly to his trust. And from his trust, to me. Claire owned 50% of the beach house. I owned the other 50. Sylvia let me sit with that for a moment. Then she said, with the measured calm of someone who has delivered this kind of news before, "There are some additional items." She slid a sealed envelope across the desk. My name was on the front in my grandfather's handwriting. I opened it. Inside was a letter, handwritten, 2 pages, the penmanship of a man who had learned to write in an era when penmanship mattered. He had dated it 3 years before his death. He told me he was sorry that he hadn't said more directly, when he was alive. He said he had watched me grow up in a family where a particular kind of noise got rewarded, and a particular kind of quiet got overlooked. And he had recognized in me, from the time I was very small, something that reminded him of himself. The attention, the persistence, the willingness to sit still and understand a thing properly, rather than moving on to the next one. He said he had never believed that the loudest person in the room was the most important one, and that he had tried, over the years, to make sure that belief had practical consequences. He said the beach house had always meant something to him beyond what it meant to the rest of the family, that the evenings on the porch had been, in the last decades of his life, among the things he valued most, that he wanted someone who understood that to have a stake in it. He said he hoped I would keep the porch chair. It was, I want to tell you, the most my grandfather had ever said to me in one sitting, even in writing. I read it twice in Sylvia's office, and then I folded it carefully and put it back in the envelope and put the envelope in my bag. And I thanked Sylvia, and I drove 2 hours back to the coast. I did not call Claire from the car. I called my own attorney first, a man I had worked with for years on real estate matters, and I explained the situation and asked him to review the documentation before any conversation with my sister took place. He reviewed it over the following week and confirmed everything Sylvia had told me. The 50% stake was valid, clean, and unambiguous. The transfer was properly documented. There was nothing to challenge. Then I called Claire. I want to be honest about how that conversation went, because I think honesty is the only thing that makes a story like this worth telling. Claire did not take it well initially. She had spent significant money on the renovation. She had built a rental income stream she was counting on. She had, in her mind, inherited the beach house outright and arranged her plans accordingly, learning that half of it had never been her father's to give, that it had belonged to Harold all along, was not a gentle landing. She was also, once the initial shock subsided, someone who understood what the documentation meant. Claire has always been practical about things that have already happened and cannot be changed. It is one of the things I genuinely admire about her. She cried once, in a way that felt real and not performed. And then she started asking practical questions, which is what she does when she's processing something. We spent 4 months negotiating, with our respective attorneys, the terms of a co-ownership arrangement. It was not simple. There were genuine conflicts. About the rental income she had already collected, about the renovation costs, about what the ongoing management of the property should look like. I want to say I was generous in those negotiations because I am a generous person, but the truth is more complicated than that. I was fair because I thought fairness was what the situation called for and what my grandfather would have expected. Whether that is generosity or something else, I leave to you. We arrived at an agreement. The renovation costs were credited against her share of future rental income. The existing rental bookings were honored. Going forward, the property is managed jointly, with rental income split equally, and either of us can buy the other out at any point at a fair market valuation that both parties must agree to. It is functional, it is documented. It is the kind of arrangement that requires 2 people to remain in communication, which has had the unintended consequence of making Claire and me closer than we've been in years. The first summer after the agreement was finalized, I went back to the beach house for 2 weeks, alone the first week, with my own family the second. The kitchen was still unrecognizable. I have made my peace with the kitchen, but the porch was intact. The matching powder-coated furniture was there, but I brought something with me. I had found it in my parents' storage unit the previous spring, half buried under boxes. The original porch chair. Heavy wood, original finish intact. The kind of chair that doesn't apologize for taking up space. I put it back on the porch, in the corner it had always occupied, facing the water. On the last evening of my second week, I sat in it as the sun went down, and I thought about my grandfather arriving every August with his leather bag and his bourbon, and settling into that chair with the ease of someone for whom rest has been genuinely earned. I thought about the conversations on the steps below him. I thought about the questions I asked and the fact that he always answered them, every single one. I thought about the letter and the careful penmanship and the phrase that had stayed with me, the willingness to sit still and understand a thing properly. I had understood in the end, not because I was clever, because he had arranged for me to. The waves came in off the water in the way they always had, indifferent to all of it, which is one of the things I've always loved about the ocean. It doesn't care about the estate documents or the renovated kitchen or the 40 years of family politics that preceded any of it. It just comes in, the same as always. I stayed in the chair until it was too dark to see the water. And then I went inside. I have one question before you go, and I'd like you to sit with it. Has someone in your life ever seen something in you that you didn't fully see in yourself and arranged, in their own quiet way, to make sure it was protected? Have you ever understood, looking back, that someone was paying closer attention than you knew? Tell me in the comments. I read every single one.